Let me thank the members of the media for joining us today. I want to talk about three things. Truth about the election process, the theology that's being pushed in this election by some quarters, and the toxicity and violence that we're seeing in this election process. First of all, you know that we are in the middle of suing the state of North Carolina governor and the Board of Elections for passing the worst voter suppression law in the country. We haven't seen this kind of voter suppression since the 19th century. And one part of it, there are many places we've already won. We won and held on to same-day registration and early voting because of a ruling by the Fourth Circuit to state a decision of the Middle District. We're fighting now the voter ID, the worst form of voter ID we've seen in the country. It started out worse than South Carolina, Alabama, then they changed it and added something called reasonable impediment. Already we are getting a lot of calls, numerous calls, about confusion, that there is not uniformity across the state. We come today because this weekend is the last weekend of early voting and the election is Tuesday, and we want to repeat for the public to hear that you can vote with or without a photo ID. If you have a photo ID, you take it. If you don't have one and have a reason that you don't have one, go to the polls and request to vote using what's called the reasonable impediment portion of the law. Now, we understand that what's supposed to happen is when voters come, there's supposed to be a greeter at every polling site that informs the citizens of the new law, not just the photo ID, but the entirety of the law. There's supposed to be placards up that inform people about photo ID, but also about the provisional ballot that can be cast through the reasonable impediment. Today, I don't have to talk about what I heard, but what I saw at my voting place on yesterday, and why we're having, I believe, this confusion and why it ought to be concerning. The state promised us uniformity. They promised us that they would be able to meet the demands of this law. When I went to vote yesterday in Goldsboro, there was a greeter, but that greeter did not inform me or other persons that I saw coming in that about the fullness of the law, both that you could vote with or without a photo ID and how. There was no signage up on the wall. When I approached the desk, I was asked if there was said to me, I need a photo ID. It was not said, I need a photo ID, and if you do not have one, here's the procedure. If I did not know about the procedure, I would not have asked. I asked, I said, well, isn't there another part? How could I vote if I did not have a photo ID? The person responded, well, we would allow you to vote a provisional ballot. Didn't say anything about reasonable impediment, and I'm not blaming the person. I don't believe they've been trained properly. I don't believe the state has done its job. The only thing they had as a matter of information was this card. Now, if you zoom in on this card, it says, it talks about the photo ID. That's all I saw in the voting place. And it was sitting on the desk. Now, there's a backside to this card, but the backside was down. And you do not even get to the issue of what if you are unable to get a photo unless you turn the card over in the back in small print. These cards were sitting down like this, a stack of maybe 10 at the most. There was nothing on the wall. There was no discussion with the poll worker. They did not inform me about the reasonable impediment or other people. And if any voter were to come in, they would have simply read, Beginning in 2016, most voters will need to show acceptable photo ID at the polls. And this sentence, which is not true, if you do not have one of these forms of photo ID, you are eligible for a free NC ID card from any DMV. That's true, but if they come to the polls, they're not only eligible to go get a photo ID, they can sign reasonable impediment right then and vote. But the average voter would be turned off or turned around by, this is all they had. This is not what the state promised. And that's why we need to call this press conference today, asking the media to get it out to people. We're turning all of this over to our lawyers. We're getting a lot of calls about this same thing. But the media must get out. You can vote with or without a photo ID. That's the law. If you have one, bring it. The law says if you don't have one, you can sign a reasonable impediment form and you can vote a provisional ballot. That's right. So we need to tell the truth, number one, about the election process. Now, there are a couple other things we want to talk about in this election. The other is the theology that's being pushed in this election. I am an evangelical. I'm what we call a born-again Christian. Many people here around here are evangelical. In fact, you can be an evangelical Jew, you can be an evangelical Muslim, you can be an evangelical Christian if you understand what evangelical really means. I learned the meaning of evangelicalism and justice from my roots as a disciple of Christ minister. I'm a minister ordained with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. It has over 1.5 million members throughout the United States, Canada, and around the world, predominantly white, actually. My denomination is predominantly white, 90% white. I learned the meaning of it from my father and my grandfather, who were all ministers. I learned the meaning of it from studying with some of the best thinkers at North Carolina Central University, Duke University, Drew University, and Union Theological Seminary, and I learned even more about the meaning of justice and community economics when I studied at MIT. In the Bible that I read, evangelicalism starts with this phrase, being anointed to preach good news to the poor. Evangelicalism in the Bible, and based on the great theological scholars who have studied it, always starts with, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. And the word poor is patokos in Greek. It means those who have been made poor by systems of economic exploitation. Evangelicalism also always begins with the words of Jesus' last sermon. His first sermon was Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. The second sermon, his last sermon, was when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? And that is not an admonition to individual charity. Because it says in the text, I will say to the nations, governments. In other words, it's about how governments set themselves up in relationship to the poor. In North Carolina's Constitution, true Christian faith, evangelicalism, if you will, is said in Article 11, Section 4, beneficent provision to the poor and the orphan and the unfortunate is the first duty of a civilized and Christian state. So according to our Constitution, the government is not being run in a civilized way unless the poor and children and the unfortunate are the first priority of public policy decisions. That's right. So authentic evangelicalism, biblically sensitive evangelicalism, is not progressive or conservative. It's love, it's justice, and it's mercy. Right. It's caring in the public square for the least of these. True biblical evangelicalism is not about any one candidate, but it is about health care and living wages and public education and voting rights and immigrants and caring for immigrants and caring for people regardless of their religion, and equal protection under the law. Yes. There are more than 2,000 scriptures in the Jewish and the Christian Bible that speak to the issue of public morality that cares about how we shape society in relationship to the poorest and not just as a matter of personal charity. That's right. That's right. That's real evangelicalism. Mm-hmm. And we have got to challenge this evangelicalism, this notion where that says if you're an evangelical, if you're anti-abortion, anti-homosexual, and pro-prayer in the school, and pro-war, and pro-tax cuts for the wealthy, and trickle-down economics, and you have a disdain for immigrants, there is not any theological justification for that definition of biblical evangelicalism. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but you cannot call it biblical evangelicalism.
That's right. Thank you. Thank God.
You cannot call it that. If anything, it is a hijacking of the term evangelicalism. And if it's pushed as authentic, it's a form of heresy. Mm-hmm. And it's immoral. Mm-hmm. It's immoral to try to hijack the great term evangel, which is a Greek word which means good news, mm-hmm. and use it as a tool for immoral justification of extreme policies. I don't care what party you're in. Mm-hmm. That's right. The love and justice, mercy, critique of our deepest religious faith and our deepest constitutional faith critiques each party and every party. That's right. And when the media says evangelicals support so-and-so, and the people you're talking about are people that are pro-war. That's right. And pro-hate, right. And pro-disdaining immigrants, right. And pro-ending health care, and pro-blocking living wages. When you do that kind of reporting, you are misreporting. Right. Right. You are not representing evangelicals. I'm an evangelical. Many of us are evangelicals. Right. It's a term that's been hijacked. That's right. And abused. That's right. Call them whatever else. That's right. But don't allow them to call themselves evangelical without critique. Thank you. Without critique. That's right. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is the toxicity of this election. We've seen rhetoric that is violent, and it leads to violent actions. We've seen it in Fayetteville and other places recently around the country. In Fayetteville, the police officers have arrested and are investigating a man who allegedly sucker punched a black man at a Trump rally.
Here's what's happened. Hello. Uh-oh.
The protests kept coming at the Trump rally in North Carolina last night.
Get out. Get out.
One after another, reportedly 17 in total. But here's what the cameras didn't show. Keep your eye on the guy with the long hair and white t-shirt on this YouTube video, waving to the crowd as he's led out of the arena. Watch again as he's sucker punched right in the face by a Trump supporter in the cowboy hat and black vest. Now watch this angle. After getting punched, the day's protester is wrestled to the ground by sheriff deputies.
Chill.
The cops didn't arrest the guy who punched him.
Jimmy Buxton is our president and district director in that area. Renee Stackhouse is his legal redress chair. They drove up from Fayetteville today. Our president here, he's already been in touch with the sheriff there. That's right. About what happened, both the actions of the so-called sucker puncher as well as the officers. They're in conversation. Mm-hmm. And as we speak right now, I believe President Buxton, the person who was hit, is actually filling out a complaint form with the NAACP.
That's true. That's right.
And as soon as it is filed with the Fayetteville branch, President Buxton has said he will alert us, and he will also be making sure that it's filed with the state office. Amen. So that our attorneys and others can look into what's going on.
That's right.
Now, the man's been arrested and charged, but there have been these reports that the victim of the punch was detained by the cops before the alleged perpetrator perpetrated. Our local president and his legal redress team are already in conversation about that with the local authorities. But today, this is what we want to address today, is the post comments by the alleged perpetrator. And based on these post comments, we want to make a call. Now, the sheriff, Earl Butler, said in a statement on Facebook, according to the Washington Post article, regardless of political affiliation, speech, race, national origin, color, gender, bad reputation, prior acts, or political demonstration, no other citizen has the right to be assaulted, to assault another person, or to act in such a way as this defendant. And I hope the courts will handle this matter with the appropriate severity for McGraw's severe and gross violation of the victim's right. That's what the sheriff said. But that same article says that in footage published by Inside Edition, the man identified as McGraw was asked if he liked the event. He says, "You bet I liked it." And he says, when asked what he liked, he responds, "Knocking the hell out of that big mouth." And then he says, "We don't know who he is, but we know he's not acting like an American." And then McCraw, according to Inside Edition, in his own words, says, "The next time we see him, we might have to kill him."
It's a shocking moment as a Trump supporter cold cocks a protester. Boom! An elbow right to the face. Watch from a different angle. The protester never sees it coming. He's wrestled to the ground by deputies. The guy who smacked him goes right back to his seat.
Did you like the event?
You bet I liked it.
Yeah? What'd you like about it?
Knocking the hell out of that big mouth. We don't know who he is, but we know he's not acting like an American.
So you deserved it?
Every bit of it.
What was that?
Yes, he deserved it. The next time we see him, we might have to kill him.
78-year-old John McGraw was later charged with assault.
Now, based on that statement, Fayetteville branch of the NAACP and the state NAACP take this very seriously.
Yeah, that's right.
The civil rights community, as one who's had death threats and suggestions. Both Jimmy and I have had suggestions of violence toward us.
That's so true.
We take this very seriously. And we are calling that based on those statements, this must be investigated not just as an assault, but as a hate crime.
That's right. That's so true.
Under state and federal law.
That's right.
Next time, we might have to kill him. And we're deeply concerned about this suggestion in campaign rhetoric that maybe people deserve certain things. Now, lastly, I'm going to say something that's going to sound strange to some of you all. It's not just Trump. He may be the loudest microphone.
That's right.
But it's all of this xenophobia
Yeah. That's right.
and this coded racial language and racial innuendos and this what one scholar calls othering people. They're not American. And this hatred toward immigrants. All of this is the problem.
That's right. That's right. That's true.
People who, when they say things like, the problem is people who want free stuff from the government. It wasn't just Trump. Romney said that. What is happening now is you've sown to the wind.
That's right.
And you're reaping the whirlwind.
That's right.
This stuff, we've heard this with Tea Party.
Yeah.
Certain folk not American. They got to get out of here. And even deeper than that for members of the media and citizens, this coded phrasing grows straight out of the white Southern strategy lexicon. It's the same lexicon that George Wallace used, Richard Nixon used, Reagan used it in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Lee Atwater used it as a campaign tactic. It's the same like when you hear people saying the president is a juvenile or unfit or not from America or stupid. It's not just Trump. We have sown to the wind, and we're reaping the whirlwind. Trump may just be using it as a beneficiary. He's decided he's just going to push it out to the nth degree. These coded, loaded words laced with fear and racism. And what they do is they create a kind of us against them mob mentality.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And when it's loosed, those words can manifest themselves into a license and inspiration for violence.
That's right. That's right.
We see it all the time in the NAACP.
Oh, yes.
We stand up for an issue, and you look down in the comment section, they say the NAACP is not an American. They're stupid. They're wrong. Something ought to happen. We know this language. We know this language. This the same. It's not immediate. People say we haven't seen this before. Yes, we have.
That's right.
Look at what happened in the end of the first Reconstruction in America, when many whites began to fear black-white coalition that were changing the South. Go back and read the same kind of language was used. It was used in 1968 to create the so-called Solid South, the Southern strategy, as a pushback against the gains in the 1960s, where blacks and whites and Latinos and interfaith groups came together and changed the country. You think it's new? Listen, in 1981, Professor Alexander Lamas did an interview with Lee Atwater. This is what Lee Atwater said about politics. He said in 1954, you start out saying N-word, 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 but by 1968, you can't say N-word politically because it'll hurt you, it'll backfire. So you have to start saying stuff like, I'm against forced busing and states' rights and all that stuff. You got to become abstract. And then you start talking about cutting taxes. You want to get really abstract. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the buses thing. And what happens is you end up pitting whites against blacks. And blacks get hurt and other minorities by the policies more than anybody else. And then he got a question by the professor. The professor said, I'm just wondering how much residue there is called racism in the anti-government, anti-Washington states' rights, return to states' right, defederalize, cut social programs. How much of it is the residue of the old days of antipathy toward welfare programs, poverty programs, and other political, social, economic programs which give power to black folks and poor folks? How much of it is racist? And Lee Atwater says, well, sure, okay, but I think this, and don't get me wrong, you go to these white country clubs and they say S. I'm tired of them getting everything and all that. But the bottom line is now it's mainstream. It's not grounded in racism, or at least it's not, the terminology is not so-called racism as much as it's an account of the network movie syndrome. I'm mad as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. Now statistically, the poor people, the people receiving all these things are black. Now, some of the Southern stuff may still be there, racism, but it's so widespread now that we've allowed it to go mainstream.
That's right.
And that's what we're dealing with. We've allowed the Southern strategy and the coded race words and fear-mongering to go mainstream. Because you can't unpack classism in this country without unpacking racism and the strategies that provoke fear. So my friends in the media and North Carolina, we are in two seasons that should make us challenge this selling, pandering, and prostituting of racism and fear. Bloody Sunday, this week, would have been the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. You go back and check what was said about those marchers and listen at how that rhetoric turned into violence on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We need to challenge it because we remember Bloody Sunday. But we also need to be challenging what's going on because this is the season of Lent and the season of repenting. And we need to challenge those who are using coded language of xenophobia, racism, fear, and hatred in a way, whether it's Trump, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, whoever it is, even if you smile while you're saying it,
Right.
even if it's Cruz, even whoever it is, this language, there's nothing but coded hatred, fear, and racism hurts us, takes us back to some dark places. We've sown to the wind, and now we're reaping the whirlwind. We're sowing fear, and fear manifests itself into frightening things. And only real love and a concern for justice has the power to set us free.
That's right.
I'll take your questions.
Reverend Martin, what do you say to Republicans that say that early voting has actually been successful, more so this election cycle than 2012?
We don't know in terms, because we aren't over the election cycle. Certainly we hope that people have used it. We fought for it. It's success because we won. Remember, they wanted to end it. We won in the courts, and the court stayed it. So the only reason you have early voting and same-day registration is because the civil rights community, black and white and Latino and women, stood up and fought against this extreme. So it's kind of interesting for them to try to claim success to something they wanted to end. But the bottom line is, the data is yet to come in of how much confusion and disruption is out there. As I told you, if it happened to me, I think I'm a pretty informed voter. And if I went into my polling place and clearly saw that the state was not providing what it said it was going to provide, where else is it happening? I could tell you, take your cameras to the polling places. See if you see placards on the wall that talk about both the photo ID, but also reasonable bet. See if it's there. See if it's clear and in view. You know, send some investigative reporters in without their cameras. See what the greeters tell them. We have, you know, people that are going in, and we're going to, you know, turn this evidence over. All we've ever wanted was the free, unabridged, and unfettered right to vote. And we keep saying to the media, don't, and the state, I'm not talking against you all because you have done a great job in many ways. In North Carolina, we're talking about a governor and a legislature that took away from North Carolinians. We're not talking about denied them. They took away from North Carolinians. Procedures that were put in place that pushed this state from being one of the lowest in voter participation to the fourth highest per capita increase. And then use that same coded language. It didn't sound like race. They said, we're doing it for the integrity of the vote. There was no fraud. No. The claim of fraud was fraudulent. Right. But listen at how that, you got to connect it. There was never a question of fraud being used in the public square until 70% of African Americans voted and Obama won. Do you see how it connects now? So all of a sudden, fraud is somehow connected to an increase in black and minority vote. That's where it's coded language that fuels racial fear.
Yeah, that's right.
These folk are this couldn't be happening.
Right.
Something's got to be wrong.
That's right. That's right.
And it's as old as what they did at the end of the first Reconstruction, and it's as old as what was done to develop the Southern strategy in the late 60s. We know it.
Right.
We know what's going on, and we're going to unpack what's going on for the larger public. And it's designed to pit people against one another. You think about why would this state deny Medicaid when 346,000 white people would benefit and 30,000 veterans? But the way people talk about it, if you listen to politics, they are getting something. Who's the they that they don't deserve? Who are they talking about? This blackening and browning of social and political issues as a way to stoke fear in the South, to undermine fusion coalition between blacks and whites and Latinos is as old as the beginning of the white Southern strategy. And so when we see all this stuff happening, and you see a Trump or Cruz for that matter, both talking, he wants a wall too. Right. when he wants to cut Medicaid. Let's not just put it all on Trump. Listen to all of them. Right. Listen to the whole rhetoric, listen to I don't care whether they use a curse word, you can smile, but listen to the rhetoric. If you want a great America, all of them are saying deny public education, deny health care, deny living wages, stand against, Muslims, whether you call it, you say all Muslims or whether you say radical Islam, that's still a coded way.
Absolutely.
Still coded. Put immigrants behind a wall, round them all up, get them out, cut voting rights because there's fraud when there's no fraud, and after you've done all that, make sure everybody can get a gun rather than quicker than they can vote.
Thank you.
If you unpack that, and this is not endorsement, we are saying as a civil rights organization, let's have real debate.
That's right.
Let's have real debate. But to simply make it that the very things that would cause the uplift of black, brown, and white people are somehow wrong and somehow un-American and somehow going to help those folk, that's a dark place. And people are playing in that place. Now they're not playing it. It's gone mainstream. It's being legitimized.
That's right. That's right.
It's being legitimized. And the more it's being legitimized, then you get a guy saying, he wasn't acting like an American, therefore, what is acting like an American? That's what that code word, that's what folks said, when Woodrow Wilson played Birth of a Nation in the Oval Office. He said those black folk and white folk that formed Reconstruction, they weren't acting like American. We had to rescue America. We had to redeem America. Woodrow, what was his name? What did I say? Woodrow Wilson? Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah, good Presbyterian.
That's right. Yeah, good Presbyterian. Yeah. And you can cover it up with a lot of things. Ronald Reagan, when he did his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, go read that speech. He used every code word. He talked about big bucks that were in the grocery line with a fistful of food stamps and porterhouse steaks. He talked about the voting rights being one of the greatest offenses to the states. All the code words. Welfare queen. Where did he do that speech? In Philadelphia. Now, he did it very nicely. He didn't use a curse word. He was very pristine. He's very, very orderly. So that's what I'm saying. Not just Trump.
That's right.
He may be taking it further than anyone else and using it to build his platform and stoke all of this fear. But we've been sowing. We've been sowing. We've been sowing. Even Romney, who criticized him the other day, he did it real nice, but wasn't it him that talked about the 50, what's that? The 47%? Yeah, that's coded language. That's as coded as anything. Yeah, well, yeah. Isn't it Rubio that said the president of the United States has been the worst divider of all time? What? It's not even truthful debate. It's just throwing out red meat and fear. It's fear. And so whoever they are, Bernie, he can't just talk about class. I hope the day when he was here, he talked about voting rights since he was in the state with the worst voter suppression. You can't just talk about class. Huh? Hillary, the other day when she mentioned the Reconstruction, she gave a quote, but it was the quote from a perspective of the Reconstruction that's actually the negative interpretation of the Reconstruction. I don't know if she meant it or she didn't mean it or she didn't know. I don't know. But my point is, we can't say we haven't seen this before.
That's right.
And we really need to drill down and unpack it so that people understand what's happening, because we've sown to the wind. And that we're reaping. And for those of us that have had threats, simply because we stood up for justice. First threat I got, President, for death, was when we went to the legislature, we got arrested fighting, Curtis Great was with me, for a just budget that would care for children. And somebody, the way we were criticized, somebody took that to mean that somehow we were going to take from them and give to somebody else. And they sent a threat into our office. This is nothing to be playing with.
That's right.
And that's why on this case, we need to deal with the truth about this election, get the word out. We need to challenge this usage of evangelicalism in a way that is a misrepresentation of the church and our deepest values. It is a political hijacking. And then number third, we need to deal with this toxicity. And one of the ways we need to deal with it, if this man says next time we might have to kill him, not just assault, but there needs to be an investigation of this as a racial hate crime.
That's right. Exactly. That's so true.
Thank you so much. God bless you.